Have you ever wondered why the quietest person in the room often commands the most attention? Why silence, when used with intention, can feel more powerful than the loudest roar? What if true dominance doesn't come from control over others, but from control over yourself? They don't speak to impress, they don't interrupt to be seen, and yet the entire room leans in when they simply exist. This is not charisma, it's not charm, it's something far more rare: silent power. We live in a time where noise is mistaken for strength, where people shout over each other, hoping volume will be heard as authority. But those who hold real power don't need to raise their voice. They wait, they observe, and they act only when the timing is so precise, it's almost invisible. This isn't about playing cruel games or manipulating others. It's about mastering the calm discipline that allows you to win long before any battle even begins. The tactics you're about to learn aren't loud, flashy, or forceful. They're subtle, quiet, razor sharp. They're built on restraint, on clarity, and on the ability to control your own energy before trying to control anything else. If you can understand this way of moving through the world, everything changes. The way you enter a room, the way people respond to you without you saying a word, the way you stay grounded while others spiral in chaos. Because in truth, noise often hides fear. People yell to cover insecurity. They threaten to mask weakness. But the one who remains still, who lets presence speak louder than words, moves with a strength that can't be imitated. This isn't just theory. This is strategic mastery. The kind that Machiavelli grasped centuries ago, long before social media battles or corporate wars. He understood that empires aren't built by force. They're built by invisibility, by understanding how to read people while revealing nothing in return. Power doesn't need applause. It doesn't react to insult. It doesn't beg for validation. Instead, it moves quietly, thinking 10 steps ahead while others are stuck on the first. And the man who no longer feels the urge to prove himself, he proves everything. His silence? It's not submission, it's provocation. A mirror reflecting back every fear, insecurity, and weakness of those who face him. He doesn't need to attack. He simply watches as others defeat themselves, caught in their own imagination. No shouting, no chasing, no emotional leaks. Just absolute stillness and the unshakable presence of someone who has mastered the art of giving the enemy nothing. But how do you build this kind of presence? How do you turn silence into influence? Let's continue, because the next part will show you exactly how to embody this quiet power in every moment. Even silence, when intentional, speaks volumes. As we saw earlier, true power doesn't roar, it waits. And in that waiting, it unsettles. Why? Because when you offer nothing, no energy, no emotion, they're left to face their own. And most people, they're terrified of that silence. But this kind of restraint isn't something you're born with. It doesn't happen overnight. It's forged in the fire of countless failures, tested through humiliation, setbacks, and moments of invisible struggle. It's built in hours of intentional stillness, where every urge to react is confronted and tamed. This is the true strength, choosing not to strike when provoked, not because you're weak, but because you already hold the upper hand. You walk with stillness like it's a hidden blade, sharp, unseen, but always ready. While others scramble to predict your thoughts, you're already 10 moves ahead, quietly watching, fully aware of what they'll do next. That is the heart of Stoic control. It doesn't mean inaction. It means choosing your actions with precision, with clarity, and with purpose. In a world addicted to reaction, you become rare, and the world respects those who can resist the urge to reveal too soon. When you enter a room and heads turn, not because you demand attention, but because you embody presence, that's when influence begins. Not a single word spoken, yet everyone listens. Because you've become a mystery, and people respect what they can't immediately define. This isn't about overpowering others with volume or aggression. It's about commanding space through presence. So let them whisper, let them doubt, let them try to read you. You don't owe them an answer. You don't need to explain your silence. Just keep building inwardly, patiently, with quiet precision. Because when you master silence, you master yourself. And once you've done that, what's left for them to use against you? Nothing. They can't disturb your mind because you already govern it. They can't provoke a reaction because you've trained yourself not to need one. That's when you begin to master perception. And when you master perception, you own the moment. In every form of conflict, whether it's a debate, a rivalry, or a quiet confrontation, the truth doesn't always determine the outcome. Perception does. The real battle doesn't begin when voices rise or tempers flare. It begins far earlier, when someone lays eyes on you for the first time. Because people don't respond to reality. They respond to what seems real. Machiavelli understood this deeply. Men judge more by the eye than by the hand, he once said. And why? Because very few will ever know your true thoughts or intentions. But everyone will witness your presence, your tone, your expression, your stillness, or your lack of it. That's why those who master appearance gain an edge before the first move is even made. It's not about being objectively right, and often it's not even about being strong. It's about appearing composed, appearing focused, appearing unshakable, especially in moments when you're secretly trembling inside. Because when the world sees you calm in chaos, something strange happens. They begin to question their own stability, and that tiny flicker of doubt, that subtle hesitation in their mind, just might be all the opening you'll ever need. So how do you sharpen this perception? How do you make presence your weapon? In the next part, we'll break down the tools that Stoics used to turn inner mastery into outer command. To shape perception is to shape power. And as we've seen, the one who appears still in a storm, who refuses to flinch when others lose control, wins long before the conflict begins. That's the Stoic's quiet victory. Because when you master yourself, you influence others without even trying. Emotional chaos pushes power away, but inner stillness, it radiates it. The Stoic understands this deeply, and so does the Machiavellian strategist. They don't interrupt to be heard. They stay silent to observe. They don't react to insult. They absorb it with poise, not because they're weak, but because they're gathering information. They wait patiently while others speak first, not out of courtesy, but calculation. They know every word said in haste becomes a weapon later in silence. They don't win by arguing louder. They win by letting others reveal too much, then calmly, quietly using those very words as tools for advantage. And no, this isn't cruelty. It's discipline. It's the art of strategic restraint in a world obsessed with impulsiveness. While others chase attention, the one who remains steady becomes the most magnetic. You don't have to defeat your opponent in dramatic fashion. All you need is to appear composed while they unravel. In a society driven by optics, the person who seems calm is treated as wise. The one who doesn't speak is assumed to be calculating, and the one who doesn't react is seen as powerful beyond measure. Because when chaos erupts and you remain unmoved, people start assigning you a mythic status, not because you asked for it, but because you made stillness look like strength. This isn't about deception for its own sake. It's not about lies. It's about being deliberate with what you reveal and what you don't. In a noisy world, mystery becomes its own form of authority. You don't have to expose the truth. You only need to manage how it's perceived. Let others rage. Let them over-explain. Let them overperform, because in doing so, they reveal everything. And you remain the stillness that unsettles them. You become the presence they can't read. And that's exactly why they fear you. Because in the end, power doesn't go to the loudest or even the smartest. It goes to the one who controls the story. And the most powerful story isn't shouted. It's shown. It lives in your posture, in your gaze, in your calm, in your refusal to be provoked. In a world addicted to drama and spectacle, the person who doesn't perform becomes the most unpredictable and the most feared. And that's when you stop needing to fight at all. You become the confrontation. Your presence alone sets the tone. You shape the terrain. You decide the terms. Yes, direct confrontation might feel brave, but more often than not, it's a trap, a trigger for ego, for chaos, for resistance. True power doesn't try to overpower someone's nature. It moves around it, subtly reshaping the space they operate in, until eventually their actions, which seem like free will, are quietly steered by the invisible boundaries you designed. So how do you create those boundaries without force? How do you bend the field without ever raising your voice? That's exactly what we'll uncover next. Influence doesn't always come from direct confrontation. Sometimes it emerges from shaping the ground others must walk on. As we discussed earlier, true power isn't about overpowering someone's nature. It's about quietly redesigning the environment they move through until their behavior shifts without them even realizing why. This is the genius of environmental manipulation. The Stoics taught. One timeless truth: control what is within your reach. You may never control another person's thoughts or emotions directly, but you can influence the conditions in which they operate. And in doing so, you steer their decisions without ever touching their will. Instead of forcing someone to change the space they must move through. Think of conflict not as a brawl, but as a chess game. The objective isn't to destroy every piece. It's to control the board. You don't need to remove your opponent from the game. You only need to shift the timing, reshape the terrain, and limit the choices until they unknowingly back themselves into defeat. A rescheduled meeting, a quiet change in access, a subtle realignment of alliances. Each of these small, almost invisible moves sends ripples across their internal balance. And before they even realize it, they're not responding from strength anymore. They're reacting from fatigue, from confusion, from misjudgment. And every misstep plays directly into your plan. This isn't about deception for the sake of manipulation. It's about precision. It's strategy refined to its most elegant form. Environmental manipulation doesn't humiliate. It doesn't seek to crush the other person's dignity. It simply reframes the scenario so thoroughly, so subtly, that your adversary starts dancing to your rhythm instead of their own. It's how seasoned negotiators prevail without ever raising their voices. It's how Stoic leaders govern, not by command, but by designing circumstances where the right choice becomes the only visible one. Rather than wrestling with volatile emotions or stubborn convictions, you shift the context itself. You adjust the lighting, you tilt the floor, and then you step back, watching as their next move becomes inevitable. And by the time they realize something has changed, it's already too late. The damage has been done, and it didn't require force. It happened through the quiet rearrangement of their reality, because the battlefield isn't always a visible place. It's not a stage with clear borders. It's a construct, one shaped by foresight, by restraint, and by patience. The person who controls the environment doesn't need to control people. They don't have to bark orders or chase outcomes. They simply narrow the available roads until every possible path leads to a conclusion they've already chosen. That, in the Stoic sense, is the highest form of dominance, not dominance over others, but mastery over the very structure in which they are forced to operate. But how do you begin applying this kind of subtle power in your own life? How do you reshape your environment to lead without force? That's what we'll explore in the next part. Subtlety is the mark of true power. As we just explored, reshaping the environment is often more effective than trying to reshape people. Now, we look at another silent strategy, the strength of being underestimated. Success, when it's real, isn't always loud. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't chase recognition. Instead, it's measured by how little force you used to get the outcome you wanted, and how naturally everything seemed to fall into place. In a world obsessed with self-projection, where strength must be visible and dominance must roar, there's one move that's far more dangerous than all the rest: silence. To appear harmless, that's not a weakness. It's a weapon, sharpened by wisdom and wielded by the disciplined. The Stoics knew this. The wise man does not boast his strength. He conceals it. He holds it with purpose, like a sword that's only drawn when it must be. And Machiavelli understood the same truth in a different form. He observed that the predator who reveals himself too early triggers defenses, but the one who limps, who apologizes, who plays the fool, he lulls his prey. He invites carelessness, and it is within that carelessness that opportunity is born. To feign weakness is not to be weak. It is mastery over perception. It is the ability to slow the tempo of a room, to let others relax, speak freely, show their cards, while you remain alert, calculating, silently preparing. You're not surrendering. You're setting the stage. You're not submitting. You're drawing out your opponent's ego, their urge to dominate, their habit of overreaching. And once they're convinced you pose no threat, once they lower their guard because they think you're beneath them, that's when they leave the very thing they value most, exposed. This is not cowardice. It is composure. The kind that knows patience isn't passive. It's tactical. The wise do not strike first, not because they fear the fight, but because they understand that a sword drawn too soon will dull in the wrong battle. True power doesn't scream. It waits, quiet, hidden beneath humility, until the exact moment when precision matters more than dominance. The Stoics lived by this. The one who conquers himself, who waits while others lash out, who plays the fool on purpose, often ends up not only controlling the fight, but rewriting the story that comes after it. Machiavelli echoed this idea in his own way. A ruler must be both the lion and the fox. The lion roars, the fox disappears, then returns when it matters most. When you pretend to retreat, when you nod, agree, or bend, you're not yielding. You're redirecting the flow. You're letting them believe they have already won. So they never notice when the current shifts in your favor. And in that illusion lies your power, because nothing blinds a person more than arrogance. It clouds judgment more thoroughly than rage ever could. And the arrogant, they walk straight into traps. Traps they would have avoided had they respected you. Let them laugh. Let them feel safe. Let them speak without filters, because what comes next depends entirely on what you choose to do with their overconfidence. Let's continue. What appears as hesitation is often a calculated pause. In the last part, we uncovered the power of being underestimated. Now we go one step further into the moment where strategy becomes action. Your silence is not weakness, it's timing. Your delay is not indecision, it's design, because when the moment finally arrives, you don't strike with noise or fury. You strike with clarity. You don't strike where they're prepared to resist. You strike where they've let their guard fall, and by the time they realize what's happening, it's already too late. To feign weakness is not merely a defensive move. It's a narrative shift. You let them write the script while quietly shaping the ending in your favor. This is the highest form of strategic patience. And when it's done well, victory doesn't come through force. It comes through realization, a quiet, haunting realization that the battle was decided long before the first move. When the time comes, finish it. That is the power of decisiveness, because when confrontation becomes necessary, it should not be partial or vague. It should be final. Half measures don't end conflict. They prolong it. They leave wounds untended and enemies still breathing. A wounded opponent doesn't walk away peacefully. They crawl into the shadows, nursing humiliation until it hardens into vengeance. Machiavelli warned us clearly. If you strike but leave your adversary with dignity, support, or even the illusion of strength, you haven't ended the conflict. You've merely postponed its next chapter. This isn't a philosophy of cruelty. It's the architecture of peace through closure. Because even the Stoics, with all their discipline and reason, knew that mercy without clarity isn't virtue, it's negligence. And negligence carries a cost. In the world of power, the most dangerous enemy is the one you allow to survive with just enough strength to rise again. Pain becomes obsession, and obsession fuels revenge. You might think you're being noble, showing restraint. But in reality, you may just be sowing the seeds of a future threat, one that comes back with a smarter plan. That's why true dominance, the kind that doesn't need to be repeated, demands finality. No loose ends, no overlapping alliances, no shared space. If confrontation is unavoidable, don't let it linger. Don't leave behind the possibility of a sequel. It doesn't always mean physical destruction. Sometimes finality is psychological. It's removing access, ending their influence, shutting down the narrative completely, so there's nothing left for them to twist or revive. You erase the trace. You delete the possibility. You leave no rope for them to pull you back in. And in personal matters, this often looks like something simple yet powerful: silence, distance, a clean, unapologetic departure. But how do you maintain that silence, especially when emotion begs for a response? How do you walk away without looking back? That's what we'll explore in the next part. Walking away isn't weakness, it's the final move of a master. As we just discussed, the true end to conflict isn't noise. It's the kind of silence that seals every exit behind you. Now, we step into that final stage, the departure that leaves no doors open, no farewells, no explanations, just a clean break, so complete, so final, that there's nothing left to reach for. In business or politics, this doesn't just mean defeating a rival. It means isolating them. It means cutting them off, not only from you, but from the entire system that once propped them up, until their relevance quietly fades away. This isn't cruelty, it's discipline. The Stoics taught that we must focus on what we can control. And when it comes to conflict, what you can control absolutely and completely is the ending. Let your final move speak louder than any threat you could ever voice. Make it swift. Make it clean. Make it emotionless. Don't gloat. Don't make a scene. Just disappear. Let your absence echo louder than your presence ever did. Let the consequences of your decisiveness do the rest. Let it be a warning, not through aggression, but through silence. Let it make one thing unmistakably clear. Testing you has a cost, and that cost is not negotiable, because the truly untouchable don't leave loose ends. They don't circle back. They don't play the same game twice. They don't linger in battles they've already won. Hesitate, and the enemy rebuilds. Show mercy, and they reorganize. Offer a second chance, and they interpret it as weakness. Decisiveness is not just a tactic, it's a shield. It's what protects you from ever having to fight the same war twice. So, finish it, not with malice, but with mastery. Not to prove your ego right, but to preserve your peace, because true victory doesn't just silence the opposition. It removes the need for further conflict entirely. When no one dares to continue the fight, that's when you haven't just won the battle, you've secured your freedom from it. And that is the highest form of power, not just victory, but closure, final, irreversible, undeniable. A psychological mirror held up just long enough for fear to reflect. Let's now shift our focus. Let's talk about a different kind of power. The kind that doesn't shout, the kind that doesn't strike, the kind that doesn't need to dominate to be felt, the kind of power that comes from stillness, from self-reflection, not retaliation. The Stoics understood that control over others begins with control over yourself, and Machiavelli saw it too, that the deepest fear isn't forced from outside, it's awakened from within. True fear doesn't come from threats. It comes from the silence that forces someone to sit alone with their own mind, because when you raise your voice, people raise their shields. But when you say nothing, they begin to question, not just you, but themselves. What did I miss? What's coming next? Why does this silence feel heavier than 1,000 words? And it's in that ambiguity, in that quiet tension, that your influence begins to grow. To hold up a psychological mirror is to master misdirection. In the next section, we'll break down how silence becomes your greatest tool of influence, how stillness can disturb more than rage ever could. When you become unreadable, you become unforgettable. As we explored earlier, silence isn't just the absence of words, it's the creation of space where fear begins to grow. In this part, we uncover how that silence becomes your sharpest psychological weapon. You let them see only what they project. You offer no confirmation, no denial, no visible reaction at all. And in that void of clarity, the mind does what it always does under pressure. It fills in the blanks, often with its darkest assumptions. You don't start rumors. You don't feed the gossip. You simply don't respond. You don't make threats. You don't even flinch. You just remain there, steady, still, unreadable. And suddenly every glance you give, every pause you take, every absence from a room becomes a riddle they can't solve. Because the human mind isn't built for prolonged uncertainty. It craves resolution. And when it doesn't get it, it starts to unravel. Not all at once, but slowly, internally. And this isn't cruelty. It's discipline. It's the practice of psychological clarity, knowing that panic often doesn't come from what you've done, but from the stories people write in their own heads when faced with your silence. That's what Machiavelli meant when he urged rulers to appear capable of great consequences, even if those consequences never come, because the possibility, the mere idea of what you might do, is often more powerful than any actual blow. Why? Because fear rooted in the imagination has no ceiling, no walls, no end. It grows, spreads, twists, until it becomes infinite. In a world that reacts to everything, stillness is disturbing. When you don't respond, you don't give your opponent a script. When you don't retaliate, you remove their reference point. And when they have no reference, they begin to spiral inward. They start seeing shadows that aren't there. Every second of your silence feels like a sentence. Every unspoken word sounds like a threat. Every calm breath you take becomes evidence of something they can't name. You become powerful, not through what you say or do, but through what you let them do to themselves. So, hold the mirror. Let them see their own reflection in your stillness. Let their guilt surface. Let their insecurity show. Let their unresolved intentions bubble upward on their own. That is the psychological mirror. You're not controlling them through external fear. You're allowing them to wrestle with the fear already inside them. And that kind of fear, the kind born from within, it's the hardest to escape. It follows them into silence, into their sleep, into rooms where your name isn't even mentioned, but your presence is still felt. That is the power of restraint, because in the end, it's not your force that makes you untouchable. It's your silence. It's your ambiguity. It's the storm they imagine in the space you leave behind. This is patience as a superpower. Now let's talk about that strength. Quiet, underrated, but utterly undefeated. The kind of patience that ends wars before they begin. The silence they fear most is the one that waits. As we saw earlier, ambiguity can do what direct confrontation never could. But behind that unsettling silence is something even more powerful: patience. In a world drunk on speed, addicted to instant gratification, and obsessed with constant reaction, Patience isn't just rare, it's revolutionary. Machiavelli understood what the Stoics had been practicing for centuries. Time, when used wisely, becomes more devastating than any weapon. The wise don't rush into battles, they don't chase applause, and they never strike just because they've been provoked. Instead, they wait, they watch, they calculate, because the one who controls time controls the outcome. Most people confuse urgency with effectiveness. They want revenge now, answers now, results right now. But urgency is a trap. It fogs judgment, burns energy, and often plays straight into the hands of your opponent, who lets you exhaust yourself before they ever lift a finger. True strategy demands restraint. When they shout, stay silent. When they lunge, step back. And when they think they've cornered you, let them overreach. Let them grow reckless, confident, sure of themselves, until they reveal more than you ever needed to uncover yourself. That's when time becomes your greatest ally. Because time isolates. It reveals weakness. It magnifies small mistakes until they become impossible to ignore. The enemy who mistakes your patience for weakness will inevitably grow arrogant. And arrogance, like rust, but corrodes their defenses from the inside out. Patience is not passivity. It's poise. It's the clearest signal that you've mastered not just the situation, but yourself, because the one who doesn't flinch under pressure is the one who holds the real power in any confrontation. The Stoics called this self-command. Machiavelli turned it into method. He didn't strike first. He let time wear down his enemies. He let doubt divide them. Let paranoia do the damage. Let missteps pile up. Until his action was no longer an attack, but a simple formality. No rage, no spectacle, just precision, delivered in silence. That's what time can do when you don't waste it chasing emotional victories. To delay is not to lose. It's to see more. To wait is not to retreat. It's to choose your moment with clarity, not impulse. The modern world teaches us to react instantly, to answer fast, to fix, to prove, to respond right now. But in that space between reaction and response, there lies the sharpest blade. Because when you slow your pace beneath the noise of others, you begin to notice everything they miss. Next, let's explore how this clarity, this hidden advantage of time, turns not just battles, but entire destinies in your favor. The one who waits sees what others miss. As we saw earlier, patience isn't passive, it's tactical. And when wielded with discipline, it turns small cracks into collapse. Now we step deeper into the next quiet weapon, strategic isolation. While they exhaust themselves chasing surface-level battles, you're watching the fracture lines underneath. While they lash out, react, overextend, you're collecting clarity. And when the moment comes, when your patience has fully drawn out their weakness, when their confidence is no longer supported, when their clarity has been fogged by doubt, then you move. Not out of anger, not to punish, but to end. That is how patience wins wars the world never sees. The kind fought not with armies, but with silence, timing, and emotional distance. Because in the end, the one who can wait controls the clock, and the one who controls the clock decides when the game is over. That brings us to one of the sharpest tools in the arsenal of subtle power, strategic distance, isolation. Machiavelli understood what the Stoics had lived for centuries. Power is not always taken through force. It's often taken through subtraction. A strong enemy is rarely dangerous just because of who they are. They're dangerous because of who stands with them. Their network, their alliances, their momentum, those are the true weapons you need to disarm. As long as they are surrounded by applause, they feel bold. As long as agreement echoes around them, they believe they're untouchable. But the moment the room starts to empty, when the support fades quietly, when no one steps forward to defend them, even the strongest begin to unravel. Because isolation isn't about public humiliation or spectacle. It's not about tearing someone down with drama. It's about erosion. Slow, quiet, undeniable. You don't draw swords. You pull threads. Let tension build in their relationships. Let hesitation creep into their circle. Let trust corrode, not through accusation, but through subtle questions. No confrontation, just quiet distance, just well-placed pauses, glances, and silence, and then you wait. One by one, their pillars fall. Not with explosions, but with absence, until they start to feel it. The shift in tone, the pause in support, the silence where applause used to be, and then it hits them. Paranoia. Even the confident begin to second guess. And when they finally look around and ask, "Why is no one standing with me?" You've already won half the war, not by breaking them, but by letting doubt do it for you. Because the final move, it isn't loud, it isn't messy, it's precise. You don't strike when they're surrounded. You strike when they're alone, mentally, emotionally, strategically. No need to destroy their name. No need for a dramatic ending. You just dissolve their influence, quietly, completely. Let them fade from relevance, not fall in fire. That is the difference between noise and power. In the next part, we'll explore how to hold that power without ever needing to display it, how invisibility becomes the ultimate form of dominance. True power isn't always loud, it's often invisible. As we've seen, dissolving someone's influence quietly leaves more impact than any dramatic display ever could. And now, as we reach the end, one truth becomes undeniable. Some moves are temporary, others are permanent. At the end of the day, real dominance isn't about overpowering your opponent. It's about making sure there's no one left willing or able to stand for them when you do. In this life, you don't need to be the loudest in the room to be remembered. You just need to be the one who moves with clarity, with restraint, and above all, with purpose. Because true power, it's not found in the domination of others, it's found in the mastery of yourself. When you stop reacting and start observing, the entire game shifts. You see more, you need less, and you move differently. Let patience be your armor. Let silence become your sharpest blade. And whatever you do, guard your peace like it's sacred. Because it is. In a world full of noise, chaos, and overexposure, peace is power. Stillness is strategy. And invisibility, that is your advantage. So remember, you don't need to raise your voice to raise your impact. Just move deliberately. Move with discipline. Move with presence. Move in silence. If this message struck a chord, comment below. Move in silence. And if you're ready to keep mastering the art of calm leadership and inner command, stay close, because the next lesson might be the one that changes everything.